Nothing But the Truth.
I won't pretend that we didn't have problems in recent years with the Labour Party. We felt that they were encouraging a lot of anti India elements and activities, including in Parliament, giving them a platform. Both of us will try to regain lost ground. It's been 14 years since we worked with a Labour government. And so we should anticipate a major, I would say, reset in our relations. And Mr. Keir Starmer has signaled this intent. But at that time, I'm sorry to say, but the Labour Party was really sort of encouraging anti-India elements, and I would not have been able to go and sort of what would we talk about? I was not, really in. I did make several attempts to talk to and meet Mr. Keir Starmer, but every time such a meeting would come up, there would be some sort of earthquake in the UK Parliament where they would take up an anti-India issue. When I say anti-India issue, I mean issues like Kashmir or things which are internal matters of India.
What is the significance of the landslide win by the British Labour Party in the UK general election that has just concluded? What challenges will the new government headed by Sir Keir Starmer face, and how would the outcome change relations with India? Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today, and in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we will answer all these big questions about the recently concluded British elections. First, a bit of background. Like India, the United Kingdom has a bicameral parliament. The House of Commons is equivalent to the Lok Sabha, whose members are directly elected by the people, and the House of Lords is similar to the Rajya Sabha, but its members are either nominated or appointed. Like the Lok Sabha, the House of Commons is the country's most important legislative making body. It has 650 members that are elected for a 5-year term, and to win or secure a simple majority, any party needs to win 326 seats. That's a little above the halfway mark, 1 seat above the halfway mark. The Prime Minister is the leader of the party that wins the most seats at the general election. When Rishi Sunak, UK's first Indian origin Prime Minister, called for an early general election, the centre-right Conservative Party had been ruling the country since 2010. Now, 14 years later, there is a major change with the left-of-centre Labour Party winning a massive majority. To analyse these results and look ahead, I'm delighted to welcome to the show Gaitri Issar Kumar, who was India's High Commissioner to the UK from 2020 to 2022 and is a top expert on the subject. So Gaitri, welcome to Nothing But the Truth.
Good morning, Raj. Thank you for inviting me. The results have been quite momentous for the people of the UK. They have given the centre-left Labour Party a very clear majority. They very easily crossed the 326 mark.
Right.
I understand that the results as of now are 409 for them.
Right.
And which is a 59.9% voter share, voter turnout, but a 33.9% of the votes.
Wow.
So it's an interesting result because Labour has achieved a win, but they will need to look at getting better voter support. However, the British press is dubbing this as an ABC election. ABC means anything but Conservatives.
Okay.
Because as we have seen, minister after minister, big stalwarts of the Conservative Party, of course, more than 70 of them opted not to stand itself.
And what about Rishi Sunak?
He has won comfortably. But he, interestingly, is the only former Prime Minister who has retained his seat. Madam Liz Truss has lost her in her constituency.
Right, who was Prime Minister before him? Yes, briefly, yes, she was, yes.
And of course, Lib Dems and far right seem to have taken their votes of the Conservatives. Interestingly, like in the rest of Europe, the far-right Reform Party has taken huge numbers
Right.
of the Conservative Party's votes, though they may not have won that many seats. But the point is that this has been quite a landslide victory as predicted,
Right.
and the people of the UK have voted for change.
That's what I wanted to come to, Gayatri. If you looked at what happened last time, the Conservatives had won 365 in 2019 when Boris Johnson was there and became Prime Minister. And of course, then they changed to Liz Truss, and then Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister in October 2022. What went wrong? I mean, here was Rishi Sunak brought in to stave off this loss of the Conservative Party. What went wrong with Rishi Sunak? Why couldn't he pull the Conservatives back before we get to why the Labour won so handsomely?
I see that in 2019, when PM Johnson came in, he was considered a charismatic leader. Every word that he said, every action of his, every move of his was given, saturation publicity, and he was extremely popular. Somehow, because of his policies, because of his party, some of the things which didn't go down well in the conservative support, and with the result that within the party itself, they began to develop factions and dissent among the party, and one had to start managing the party itself. Then, of course, the economic policies of PM Truss. So it looks like when PM Rishi Sunak inherited government, he had a huge set of issues to deal with, and more than managing the country, he seemed to have to manage the Conservative Party itself. And then, of course, the ratings started going down, the
Right.
economic situation in the UK because of, and I'll come to that
Yeah.
later if you wish, but if you, I can talk about that now also. But the point is that he felt that it would be better for the party, perhaps intending that a surprise decision for polls, snap polls, would catch the opposition party on the back foot. But he dissolved the parliament on the 30th of May after announcing on the 22nd that there'd be snap polls. The point is that the Conservatives, I think they outlived their popularity, and Prime Minister Sunak was just trying to keep it all together. And then finally, he took the inevitable decision.
Now, if you come to the Labour Party's win, and the fact that the last time they got such a massive victory was in 1997 when Tony Blair came to power. I think he won a little more seats, 418, if I'm not mistaken, to 409 that the Labour has got this time. What is the reason for the revival of the Labour Party? You had problems with Jeremy Corbyn. He was removed by Sir Keir Starmer, who's going to become Prime Minister soon. What did Keir Starmer do to make the Labour win? What was his strategy?
Well, we see that Mr. Keir Starmer became the leader of the party in 2020, and he seems to be seen by the UK public as a person who is less charismatic than the Prime Minister Johnson or Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, but a solid, stable, understated competence kind of person. And he apparently has rejuvenated the Labour Party by changing it, by shifting the balance from the left of the party to the right, and taking out the extremists, taking out the pro-Corbyn, moving his right flank junior party members or trusted people more towards the upper echelons of the party, and then made a strategy for winning this election. It is said that David Lammy, who is a shadow foreign secretary, had told him, let's go for it, let's take 10 years. He said, no, I will win in 5 years. He was so determined.
Wow.
The message that he gave out was that he's a person who will fight injustice, fight anything that's going wrong, and fix it. So, for a population that was suffering the effects of Brexit, just while they could even settle into a post Brexit situation and stabilize, the UK was in lockdown because of COVID-19. Then after that, the UK has had to spend a lot on supporting Ukraine. So it's been a series of issues, problems, mostly economic, one after the other, that have directly affected the population of Britain. So
Right.
Mr. Keir Starmer seemed to have the answer, that he will restore public services, he will clean up the system, clean up the NHS. Some of the key issues in the elections, he decided that he would sort of tackle them. He promised the people he would tackle them, but PM Sunak, of course, has been accusing him of not having a proper plan. For example, for immigration, apart from scrapping the Rwanda planes.
Right. I want to actually come to that a little
Yes.
later. You were talking about the economy. Now, the fact is that the past 14 years has seen probably among the worst economic growth, with GDP growth at a low of 4.3% as compared to very, very high growth. If you looked at from 1997 to 2010, you had an enormous growth, averaging close to 43%. Some say, if you compare the figures 1997 to 2010, and now if you look at it, it has grown much, much slower. The GDP, per capita GDP also has considerably, after having a huge spike by 2010, is now estimated to be around $45,000, which is actually stagnated for the last 6-7 years. So what went wrong with the economy, and what is Keir Starmer's plan to tackle the economy?
Well, you're absolutely right. This has been a period of worst income growth for last 15 years, and also coupled with a huge, net migration. 685,000 people have entered. Of course, this becomes a burden on the taxpayer. And Mr. Keir Starmer, in his manifesto, he has sort of promised that he will bring in more housing, he will bring in more, he will restore better public services. All these would help a person in his day-to-day life. But here is where the question crops up. How is Mr. Keir Starmer going to fund all this? Where is he going to be able to fund the economy? So the answer lies with Mr. Starmer. I think it remains to be seen how he is going to find the money to address the economic slowdown in the UK. But for this, he does want to reconnect the UK with the rest of the world and not ignore the geography of being close to the EU and the interdependence between the UK and the EU. So these are the things which he would probably, work on rebuilding, reconnecting. Of course, one of the slogans now is that Britain will now have a chance to get back its future. And of course, he's going to bring about change. It's not very clear, except, of course, in a very, very detailed and ambitious manifesto. But how the Labour Party is exactly going to finance the economic reform remains to be seen.
Now, one of the things you had mentioned earlier was the National Health Service, which you said had been lagging behind. If you look at statistics, the number of people on the waiting list was said to be 7.6 million people in April this year, with some of them having to wait almost a year for treatment. Now, the medium wait was 3 months as compared to 1 month in 2010 when the Conservatives took over. And even emergencies like accidents had to wait for an average of 4 hours for treatment. So what went wrong with the NHS? I mean, you were there at that period. You were High Commissioner to India. What was going wrong? Why can't they fix the NHS system?
Well, again, this was a matter of funding. From what I can see and what I used to hear, it was a matter of funding, cutting down staff. They could not modernize as much as they would like to. I used to keep hearing that the NHS is kind of getting a bit run down. The waiting periods are because of not enough doctors available. Equipment needs to be modernized. We saw at the time of COVID how the NHS rose to the occasion. So the personnel and people and all are there. We have our Indian doctors who are a huge percentage of the celebrated NHS. And by itself, it's an excellent health system. But it needs, again, it needs funds.
And that's what this government has to do. You'd also talked about migration. And the fact is that Indians are the largest migrants over there. I think something like, 6.85 lakh people have gone, that's 685,000, three times as high as a decade ago. And this is something that the conservatives had promised to restrict. For us, for Indians, of course, this is an issue. I'm sorry, the overall is 6.85 lakh, which is Indians around 2.5 lakh, which is 250,000.
Yes.
Sorry, my mistake. But so you have 6.85 lakh people entering UK every year. 2.5 lakh of them are Indians. And the fact that Rishi Sunak had tried a policy which is very controversial, the Rwanda sort of lift off over there. How is Keir Starmer going to differ in this? Was he against the kind of migration policies of the Conservatives, and what is his solution?
As I mentioned earlier, we don't know what he's. First of all, I should differentiate between the illegal people who are arriving in the UK through illegal means, many seeking asylum. Those are the people that the Sunak government, wanted to, he called them the undocumented people, and wanted to send them to Rwanda while their asylum claims were being processed in Rwanda. But this was blocked by the UK courts, and no flights for Rwanda have taken place yet on these lines. But and the Labour Party has said that it'll end these Rwanda flights, and but it'll cut down the net migration figures, and that is the official migration. So, what is their plan? That has not been shared yet. I couldn't find it in the manifesto, which I was going through. But important thing is that the people of the UK, while they respect and regard and highly value the contribution of the Indian community, and they do not have anything specifically against Indians or any, they are a very integrated kind of population, a very pluralistic population, but now they are feeling the burden of the numbers. And that is the issue. They're feeling the burden on the taxpayer. Every time there is an influx of migrants, that means the taxes are going to be, they'll either stay or they'll go up or whatever. So this is the reason why they are, the people of the UK would rather have a leader who will, put a ceiling on immigration, or at least manage migration, the official migration, a little better.
So you've had, 3 or 4 major issues that we discussed that actually determine the outcome of these elections. We talked of the economy and the slow growth rate. We talked of the NHS, which is a very personal issue on health, which people felt completely unhappy with. The migration issue, where one of the reasons of Brexit and others was partly migration from other places that were there, apart from other issues that they wanted of independence. And you've also looked at the fact that there's inflation in many senses, and the cost of living has gone up in it. So these are economic issues and political and social issues that have to develop. But this segues well into looking at India-UK relations, because one of the stickiest points that we have had, particularly with Labour, are, apart from migration, had always been Kashmir. If you recall, when Tony Blair was there have been some real tough situations that India had to deal with, where they tried to poke their nose into Kashmir in a large way. So how do you see the Labour, return of Labour and its impact on India-UK relations?
Well, India will, of course, work with the government that the people of the UK elect. And the new British government themselves will want to work with India. Remember that India has always considered the Labour as a friendly party. We've considered it our natural home since the days of our independence. With the people of UK, we have shared diplomatic values. Our leaders call us natural partners because of our complementarities, and our leadership in the Commonwealth is very useful to those 54 countries, many of them which are developing. Um, I won't pretend that we didn't have problems in recent years with the Labour Party. Um, uh, we felt that they were encouraging a lot of anti India elements and activities, including in Parliament, giving them a platform. But I take it at face value that the Labour Party has changed all that. I've heard that the extremists have been marginalized, or the Labour Party policies have changed. So let's see. Both of us will try to regain lost ground. It's been 14 years since we worked with a Labour government. And so we should anticipate a major, I would say, reset in our relations. And Mr. Keir Starmer has signaled this intent to build on the foundation laid by the Tory government, which has for 14 years. In fact, it was Prime Minister Johnson who, in his integrated review of foreign policy, gave a huge priority to India and working with India. Then, of course, the Indo-Pacific tilt. So there's been a significant enhancement of bilateral cooperation. We have the roadmap to 2030. And the Conservative Party, has, of course, PM Johnson at that time, and our Honorable Prime Minister worked on and signed a 10-year roadmap for cooperation across the board in almost all the sectors of our shared interest. We are, of course, also working together on climate change. So these things will obviously be continued by the Labour Party. I mean, there's such a good, strong foundation. And Mr. Keir Starmer has said that there can be no energy transition without an energy transition in India. And he called India an indispensable partner, not only to Britain but to the developed world. And he also said that he would like to make sure that he continues a special partnership with India. And so these are elements which make me optimistic. And of course, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Mr. David Lammy, who has shared his India connection, Indian ancestor, and his great grandmother was a lady who went from Calcutta. So we have another leader of in the UK who has a kind of India connection. We saw that Prime Minister Johnson and Prime Minister Sunak had a great understanding and sensitivity to India's way of approaching its very complex region and dealing with the world.
I was just curious, Gaitri, sorry to interrupt you, just curious that did you, interact with Keir Starmer when you were there? What is the assessment of Keir Starmer as compared to Boris Johnson, as compared to Rishi Sunak? What kind of politician is he? What kind of leader is he?
Well, I didn't personally. Of course, because of COVID, we could not very often personally meet the leaders. So it would have been a video call, or later it could have been a personal call. But at that time, I'm sorry to say, but the Labour Party was really sort of encouraging anti-India elements, and I would not have been able to go and sort of what would we talk about. I was not really in I did make several attempts to talk to and meet Mr. Keir Starmer, but every time such a meeting would come up, there would be some sort of earthquake in the UK Parliament, where they would take up an anti-India issue. When I say anti-India issue, I mean issues like Kashmir, or things which are internal matters of India, which made us uncomfortable. And had I gone and met him, I would have really been probably questioned by our Twitterati. So I extended very discreet messages to him, that we should there should be sensitivity on the part of the Labour Party. Many of the people around him, senior most leaders, I had a very, very close and good practical day-to-day kind of relationship with them, who had shown a lot of understanding. But I feel that Mr. Starmer had at that time outsourced the relationship with India to these good people. So it was a time for me to share my concerns about the Labour Party's approach towards India and towards anti-India elements. And I did that with in a robust and a very candid and frank way. And I found Labour Party very receptive. I found them, these leaders, saying, no, 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 we've not, this is not intended, and we need to. But this is a right of freedom of expression and things like that. So we used to take it and deal with it, but we used to always make it known how we feel about these things. But I feel that Mr. Starmer has been giving very, very strong signals since he became a party leader. And he actually reached out now to our finance minister and to our commerce minister, saying that he would like to go ahead with the FTA. He'd like to.
That is something I wanted to talk to you about. Now, do you see the Labour Party pushing through this trade agreement? What have been the holdups? There's, of course, questions of high tariffs, whether it was in automobiles and Scotch whisky that Britain wanted us to reduce. We had our issues in terms of ensuring our, our service industry, IT service industry and others, particularly workers going there and getting visas. Has that been sorted out? How close are we to clinching a free trade agreement with the UK, and why is it so important?
I understand from our colleagues in India and our High Commission in London that with these 14 rounds having taken place, things are on course. The Labour government will, just like the previous government, since UK and India have a very, very strong trade relationship, right. 30 billion, and we are the second largest FDI contributor to the UK. UK is the sixth largest FDI contributor here to India. Labour Party would, especially due to the situation of its economy, they would want to complete this FTA. But being in majority, it remains to be seen whether they are tougher on climate issues in the FTA, because there is a carbon trading on which they were, while they were in opposition, they were pretty tough on some of the climate change issues, sustainability, and also on the migration, because we would like to have visas for our services. Since the UK has a strong IT and financial services sector, it would be a win-win situation for both. But Labour, they may negotiate hard on these particular issues. This is what I can see. But from my colleagues who are actually at the negotiating table, I understand that things are on course, and the negotiations had stopped for a while because of the elections on the UK side. But I'm optimistic that being in majority, they might have all the wherewithal to push it through.
Well, Gaitri, I think, of course, we look forward, India looks forward to the new government headed by Sir Keir Starmer, and of course, the improved India-UK relations. Thank you so much for taking time out to give us your valuable insights, and let's hope that India-UK relations get better. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's it from me. Thank you for being with me in this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing But the Truth.